So you guys are doing like RESTful services or something over there, right?
Yeah, so I've been on this project for almost a year, and I'm not even sure I know what that means yet.
What RESTful services mean?
Yeah.
So are you guys doing like the whole hypermedias, the engine of application state stuff? Probably not then, if you don't know what it means.
Nope.
What? So in your mind, what does REST mean?
So you have resources that represent things, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that you have interactions with these things. You can have different actions, the HTTP actions, get, post.
Yeah, the whole
delete.
uniform interface thing where it's the same verbs mean the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, it's great that you have some sort of uniform expectation of what something is going to do. But it sort of breaks down because it's this very like high level theoretical set of principles, I guess,
Right.
that don't seem to really translate into actual business cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I've seen is, they talk of, we're consultants, right? So everything's either a quadrant or a pyramid, and they talk about this pyramid of a maturity model for REST, where the higher up you go, the more closely you simulate that theoretical basis of REST. And it feels like it's really hard in practice to sit there at the top. You always have to compromise somewhere along the way to deliver that business value. And it gets, the real world changes things.
Yeah.
What are some of the bigger challenges you guys have had?
I think the biggest challenge is that at the end of the day, our client's business is not about things. It's about interacting with those things and how those things interact with each other. So it's really hard to model resources that do something or represent the doing of something. It's very much, it feels unnatural to have a resource that represents like the nounification of a verb.
Yeah, reify. They call it reification. Yeah, yeah, like a transaction. Is kind of thing. Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? Because the whole uniform interface thing and the fact that we're modeling resources and have the consistent verbs acts on them is great because it's super generic. So if you're a public API or something and you can have 1 million consumers, that generic interface means a lot. I often wondered about that, like how much value in the context of an enterprise where we know who our consumers are and we actually have some control over them. How much value does that bring? Like that might be worth compromising and go towards a more RPC style in some scenarios. I'm not really sure where the trade-offs are yet, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like just around like breaking stuff, because you guys, how many consumers do you have for your services?
Not very many at this point.
Not very many. Have you guys had to, like, when you think of service design and stuff and you change something, is that a real problem for you? Because that's a common problem I hear, is that it's so hard to avoid a breaking change.
Right, exactly. And then you have to think about versioning and how you're going to be handling that, and how long do we keep old versions in production? At what point do we say this is deprecated and you have to go to the new version? So yeah, that's also really challenging, even at the point of not having very many consumers.
Are you guys doing, so there's this thing called consumer contract testing where like the consumers that you have will write some tests that say I expect this field when I call this service. Do you guys have anything like that?
So we're actually doing some consumer contract testing of our own because we are actually interacting with other services.
Oh, cool.
So we have lots of a fairly weird suite of tests that interacts with a lot of different legacy services,
right?
And not so legacy services, just to make sure that they're doing what we expect them to do. And the good thing about that is that we can test that in isolation from the code that we've written.
Yeah, it's like it's the canary in the coal mine that maybe they've changed something.
Right, exactly.
I remember I was on a really large SOA RESTful project a few years back, and we had more than a dozen teams all with their own services, and for a year it took around 6 weeks after a break and change was introduced before a consumer would realize that they were now broken, and this was still in development, right, not even production. And when we introduced those consumer tests, it got down to less than an hour. It was one of the most valuable things that we were able to do in that enterprise.
Right, exactly. So we're testing even like queues that get messages from mainframes and how they are formatted and what they look like and do they look how we're expecting them to look.
Yeah.
A lot of times the messages will change and nobody will tell us, and then we don't know what this message is, because even though it's the same message we've been getting, because it's called something else,
Yeah,
or it's identified in some different way.
Yeah, it's never easy. It's just there's no magic pixie dust for this stuff, but some of that stuff kind of helps
Yeah.
move the ball forward a little bit.